Thanks for tuning in to Fuel Your Wellness. My name is Ashley Grant, formerly Ashley Cotta, and I'm a registered dietitian and wellness enthusiast. My goal is for all of you watching to adopt a new, different, wider perspective of health and wellness that's not just nutrition and fitness. However, today we're going to mostly focus on nutrition, and that will be prenatal nutrition. So I want to be able to share with you some of the key nutrients, 8 key nutrients for a healthy pregnancy. Recently I found out I was pregnant, and I want to share a little bit of my journey with you as well and let you know what really it is that you want to focus on for any mothers out there or anyone who maybe plans to be pregnant one day. Now, I know it can be very stressful to feel like you really want to make sure you get all the right nutrients, make sure your baby is healthy, but you also want to make sure you are healthy as the mother as well. And I find that as we go through these different nutrients, you might notice that all of these are really just what we should always be consuming, but it's just extra important during pregnancy because we might not regularly focus on getting a well-balanced diet or having the right supplements that we need for optimal health. So this is really, again, for the mother and for, of course, the health of the baby as well. And what I like to point out before we get started is that when it comes to supplementation, it is extremely important to recognize that we only absorb about 10% of supplements. So with that being said, if you notice on the right-hand side of a supplement bottle with a nutrition fact label that it says like 2,000% of the daily value, you're not going to get all that 2,000%. You're only absorbing some of it. So sometimes it is necessary, and especially in pregnancy when your nutrient needs are a little bit higher, it's important to get a higher daily value than just 100% for certain nutrients. So with that being said, I'm going to get started on the first nutrient, choline. So choline we need in about 450 milligrams per day. This is about the same, honestly, as a non-pregnant adult. So this one doesn't change too much, but it's more of that it's important to make sure you're getting it. Because again, some people aren't really concerned about their health until they're pregnant. So some of the sources, actually the number one source that you might think of when you think of choline is eggs. And as you might know, I specialize in plant-based nutrition. So I'm going to also be giving tips for anyone who is thinking of becoming pregnant or is pregnant who is also plant-based. Some other sources are chicken, beef, fish, and then some plant-based sources are split peas and chickpeas. Now, again, because of the lack of variety, I'll say, in the plant-based diet for beginners, at least, it's important to make sure you supplement, but either way, everyone should take a supplement during pregnancy. And the other thing to really keep in mind is, I know from my experience, first trimester can be a time where you really don't have much of an appetite. So the food sources might not be involved as much as maybe the second and third trimester. So that first trimester is really, really important. And not only that, but it's actually these nutrients that I'm going to be discussing are important before you become pregnant if you're planning to do so. And so going back to choline, the function of choline is to help with the development of the spinal cord and the brain. And you'll notice a very common theme that a lot of these nutrients do just that. It really helps with the brain development, which is of course super important. And this one in particular is going to help prevent a lot of spinal abnormalities that may happen. I think they formerly were a lot more common than they are now because, of course, we know a lot more about what is needed in pregnancy. So that's number one, choline. The second nutrient is DHA. I'm going to try not to butcher the name, but it's docosahexaenoic acid. And it is an essential fatty acid that we need all the time. Again, this one's really not much different pre-pregnancy versus pregnancy versus just for a normal adult who's not pregnant. Now, we need about 300 milligrams a day of DHA, and the main sources are seaweed or fatty fish. So fatty fish, the most common source of that is salmon. So I think we all kind of know that, and we might be consuming that. And if we're not consuming that, that's why seaweed's really important. But also, if those things we're not consuming, then it's really important to supplement, as always, like I said. And so this one's also important for fetal brain development and actually retina development. So the eyes, the functioning of the eyes, and not only during pregnancy, but also for the baby itself once it's born. So I think up to 18 months is what the baby needs DHA in high amounts for that retina development and brain development. And the third trimester of pregnancy for the mother is the most important time, but I think it's important to just take it all the time anyway. So if you're not consuming fish regularly, I would definitely suggest a supplement. The supplement I take actually has all of these nutrients that I'm discussing today in it. So it's really convenient. So if you have questions about that, definitely send me an email if you have any questions about which supplement, what's a good supplement for you to take. Now, number 3, the nutrient that is probably the most well-known, I would say, is folate, also known as folic acid. But I do want to discuss that the best source to consume it in is folate versus folic acid, methylfolate to be specific. And this is also known as vitamin B9, so it's one of those B vitamins, but this is one of the most important nutrients to consume during pregnancy, but not only during, before pregnancy. And this is because it's important for prevention of any neural tube defects. The neural tube is what eventually is formed into the spinal cord and brain. So if you can keep yourself having folate-rich foods prior to pregnancy, or even they often suggest having, any childbearing age women to consume a folate supplement or have folate in your multivitamin because of this reason. So we need about 600 micrograms per day, about 400 micrograms for non-pregnant adults, so a little bit higher of a need for pregnant women. And some of the sources can be, of course, from food, green leafy vegetables, edamame, lentils, sweet corn, which I want to highlight because I think a lot of people think corn doesn't have nutritional value, but it definitely does, as well as broccoli and avocado. So these are some of the sources. However, like I stated before, I know during that first trimester, it's not always these types of foods that you're craving. I know for me it was bagels and that was it. So it's really important to make sure, again, that you're supplementing if you're not consuming adequate amounts of these. And even if you are, you need higher amounts of folate. So folate is taken even pre-pregnancy from the baby. It's kind of taken from our stores, which is why it's important to have it pre-pregnancy. And I know that for me, when I got my blood work done, that was one of the things that was a little bit low, and it's likely because I was just consuming enough for me, not for a second human. So it's definitely important to get that in. Methylfolate, like I said before, is the best form to consume because it's in its form that is best absorbed. So folic acid has to transform into methylfolate. So it takes a little bit more time and work to get to that point. So if you can take a supplement that's already in methylfolate form, it's easier to absorb for the body, which of course is a lot better for us. And week 6 of pregnancy is when it's really important for you to consume high amounts of folate, and usually you don't know at this time, which is why I keep stressing like taking it beforehand, or if you know one day that you want a baby and you're a woman of childbearing age, like it's just a great one to incorporate into your daily routine. Now that was number 3. Number 4 is iodine. Iodine is something I feel like most people don't know as much about. just like choline as well. Those are kind of two that are not as well known, but iodine we need in about 250 to 300 milligrams per day. And the needs are a little bit higher in pregnancy as, you know, the mother, she shares her stores with the baby. And of course, iodine, if you know about it, you know it's for thyroid function, which is still true for the mother, but also for the baby's thyroid function, and then also for the nervous system of the baby. So it's really important for these things. And what we can actually focus on in terms of foods that have iodine in it is salt that is iodized, which isn't often used these days because often we're using Himalayan salt, pink Himalayan sea salt, things like that. And those are great options, I will say. They have other key nutrients in them. But when it comes to iodine, it's great to use iodized salt. So like Morton salt, things like that. But the other sources that we can get iodine from are fish and shellfish, seaweed, eggs, poultry, and dairy products. And like I said, out of those sources, there's only seaweed, and actually prunes are also a good source of iodine. So those are really the only two plant-based sources. So again, if you can get a prenatal supplement that has iodine in it, you're gonna be better off. Now, the number 5 that again is always important for every single person on earth, especially those who eat plant-based, is iron. We know, for the most part, I think a lot of people know iron comes from red meat, and that's kind of the only source that we think of when we think of iron. We need about 27 milligrams a day, but 45 milligrams a day for pregnant women who are vegan or plant-based. So it's almost double for those who are plant-based eaters. And that's because we absorb less from plant-based sources of iron than we do of heme iron, which is from meat and animal products. And so some sources are meat, of course, like I said, we all kind of know like steak is gonna get you some iron in there, poultry, seafood, and then leafy vegetables, green leafy vegetables like kale, collard greens, Swiss chard, spinach. These are gonna have great amounts of iron in them, as well as pumpkin seeds. So if you've ever seen those green pepita pumpkin seeds, you know, you can throw those into some things, into your snacks, on top of your oatmeal, just having a handful of them. Those are a great way to get some more iron in. Quinoa is a whole grain that you can get some iron from, as well as dried fruit. So this could be raisins, it could be dried apricots, it could be prunes, like we said before. And then molasses, maybe not something everyone uses all the time, but maybe you make some tasty molasses cookies, or you throw it in as your sweetener of choice from time to time. Dark chocolate, my personal favorite version of iron. It's definitely one of my favorite sources of iron. It tastes good. It's, you know, great to have on a regular basis if you have it in small amounts. And then legumes. And I just want to touch upon that really briefly, because I think legumes is kind of thrown around a lot, that term, but maybe not always understood. And what that really means is lentils and beans. So lentils and split peas as well, that can be in this category. So maybe it's split pea soup, it might look like throwing some chickpeas on your salad, might look like black bean burrito. These are some ways to incorporate legumes, and then lentils as well, that falls in this legume category. That might be like lentil soup. I like to make lentil sloppy joes, lentil shepherd's pie, things like that. And so I really want to go into the function of iron, because again, I'll bring in my experience for you a little bit. Before I knew I was pregnant, in December, I was very out of breath, and I just thought it was that I was getting out of shape, but it really, I know now, based on my lab work that I got done shortly after I found out I was pregnant, that I was a little bit low in iron. Now, I wasn't significantly low in these things, but that little bit of a deficiency really made a difference in the way I was able to breathe, in the way I'm able to exercise. And so the reason that's so important, iron helps to make hemoglobin, and the job of hemoglobin is to transport oxygen to tissues. And so if I'm not having enough hemoglobin, the oxygen is going to be tough, right? And so I'm not only needing hemoglobin for me, I'm sharing my oxygen with another human now, right? So same for you. If that's the case for you, you might want to make sure that you're taking extra iron supplements or maybe just consuming more of these different sources that I mentioned. And your body just needs so much more oxygen once you're pregnant, and you'll notice that, you'll feel that. And if that's the case for you, go to iron as your first kind of line of defense, because I think we don't often enough know why these symptoms are happening. We just kind of think, oh, it's normal. But it doesn't have to be regular for you if you can add some nutrients in to fix that. Now, that was number 5. Number 6 is vitamin B12. If you're a plant-based eater, you already know B12 is necessary to supplement all the time, every day, right? But for anyone in general, we lose about, I think in the 3rd trimester it is, 30% of the B12 stores are gone in the body. So we really need to supplement in general if you're pregnant, but also if you're a plant-based eater and pregnant, it's essential. And really there's nothing that shows too much being bad. It's actually a lot of studies I was looking at this past week, this past month, showing that more B12 is actually better. So the best form of B12, just like with the folate, is methylcobalamin is the way you say B12. Methylated B12 is another way you can say it. Cobalamin is the actual vitamin's name. And you need about 1,000 micrograms per day in the form of a supplement. Now, you probably don't need as much if you're not a plant-based eater, because you're probably regularly getting B12 sources. And some of those sources, again, are anything from an animal. So anything like meat, eggs, chicken, fish, some other things like especially clams, any shellfish in particular has a lot of B12 in it, like crab as well. And then of course like eggs, cheese, etc. Nutritional yeast, if you're a plant-based eater, I'm sure you have that in your kitchen. That is just essentially, for those of you who don't know, it's essentially kind of like a spice. I keep it in my spice cabinet, and it adds a little bit of a cheesy, nutty flavor to foods, but it also is packed with nutrients, including some of the ones we already discussed, but especially B12 and protein. So definitely keep that in mind. Sprinkle a little bit of that on your food if you feel like you need a little extra. And of course, fortified foods, definitely keep in mind, I think sometimes they're underrated, because fortified foods like fortified cereals, even tofu, those things can really increase your intake of these vitamins, especially B12, that you might not be getting enough of. And B12 has a lot of functions. So in general, it helps to make the baby's DNA, which is a huge role, right? And then really keeping in mind that folate we talked about. Folate and B12 are like brothers, cousins, whatever you want to call it. They really work together for a lot of different functions in the body. They create those red blood cells that we discussed, and it helps iron to function in the body. So again, B12, folate, and iron all work together to really produce oxygen and get the oxygen to the tissue and to the baby. B12 and folate also help with the immune function and mood. So really, it's important for the baby and it's important for the mother. Really make sure these are probably the top 2, especially for plant-based eaters, as well as iron, that I would say absolutely you have to supplement. Now, number 7 is vitamin D. This is the one I'm gonna give you a little bonus tip for nutrients. So yes, I'm discussing 8, but I kind of give you 9 here, because with vitamin D, also it comes with, most people know, calcium helps to absorb vitamin D. right? And so we'll talk a little bit about that. But what vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. It's actually more like a hormone and in the way it works in the body than it is a vitamin for many different reasons. We need about 600 IU per day, but that might look like 4,000 IU in supplement form. Because again, especially if you're watching this, you likely live in New England, and we know we don't get enough sunshine in the winter, and so we're likely lacking vitamin D. And that's why every single person from October to May should really be taking a vitamin D supplement, always, right? But in particular, like I said, it's really important for mothers who are expecting to also be taking that supplement. And some sources you can get vitamin D from are fish, eggs, tofu, even fortified juice, like you might see vitamin D on some orange juice containers. And actually, my favorite thing to tell people about vitamin D and the way you can get more of it, even eating plant-based, is if you like mushrooms, you can put mushrooms in the sun, leave them in the sun for like 10-15 minutes, just like you would go in the sun, and then you can cook with them and they'll absorb some of the vitamin D from the sun. So it's really cool. I love that tip. Definitely try it. So one of the functions of vitamin D is to help the baby's bones, kidneys, heart, teeth, and nervous system. So again, you're hearing a lot of nervous system that has to do with the brain and spinal cord, super important from all these nutrients, right? And it helps absorb calcium, which is needed in elevated amounts during pregnancy. So we really need these two paired together. And if you are, again, plant-based, you're probably not going to have as many sources of calcium than a non-plant-based eater, right? Than a regular eater, we'll call it. And so it's especially important, again, during that first trimester when you might not have the appetite that you normally have. So taking a supplement is really great. I will say my favorite supplement for calcium, it has calcium and magnesium in it, and it is in the form of 2 little pieces of dark chocolate. So definitely suggest that one. And keeping in mind, vitamin D, again, is a fat-soluble vitamin, which means you need to take it with fat, and there's, of course, some fat in the chocolate, so it really helps to absorb that. So making sure you're taking B vitamins, at least with something liquid like water, it's a water soluble, and then vitamin D is a fat soluble. And then another fat soluble vitamin, number 8, is vitamin K, but specifically K2. Now, K2 is really important, again, to take with a fat source of some sort. So whether that's a supplement form, you're taking it with some food, or if it's food that you're consuming, you're going to, of course, make sure it has fat in it. So the amount needed is about 90 micrograms in supplement form. And really, there's only one plant-based source of K2, and that's something called natto, and it is a Japanese fermented soybean food. And so most people are probably not, you might not have even ever heard of it. You're probably not consuming that regularly, right? So supplementation is really, really key. And this K2 helps with bone development of the baby and helps also the mother to maintain bone density during pregnancy. And something that's kind of a side note, a little bonus again, is that K2 can prevent calcification of the placenta. So it's really, really important because that placenta is really important, of course, for the baby, and it's its nutrient supply. And so these are my main 8 different nutrients that I think are really important to have. And if you can find one supplement that has all of these, that's amazing. But keep in mind the amounts and what other sources of food you're going to consume. Because again, going back to what I said in the beginning, only absorb 10% of supplements. So you have to make sure that supplement is just a supplement of your food intake, right? So we want to try to get as much as we can with food first always, and then supplementing as needed. But every pregnant mother should be supplementing with a prenatal vitamin, and there's so many out there that I'm sure you'll find one that's good for you. Just some tips again. trying to find one with folate, methylated folate versus folic acid, just a little bit easier to absorb for most women, most people in general. If you're plant-based, B12, super, super important. Iron, absolutely necessary, 100%. So these are just some of the ones that I would say, take a look at your prenatal. If you don't have some of these, maybe you have to add a supplement on the side, or if you don't have enough of the amounts I discussed today, then maybe just again, take added supplementation or eat a little extra nutrient-dense foods. So again, if you have any questions about any of this, please reach out to me. Again, you can get my email from the screen here, and I hope that you tune in again to Fuel Your Wellness. I will see you soon.